In my world there is music and good vibes and laughter and lovers, adventure and friendship. We know who we are. And I don't think I would be me without you.
Hello and welcome everyone to Beethewellness podcast episode number 26. I'm not even going to try it in Spanish this time.
26. I had to count it out.
Awesome.
I don't know why we want to say it in Spanish every time.
I don't know. Well, because when we did number 8,
yes.
It was funny because it was the Ocho.
Yeah.
You know, like, what, I don't
yes.
know. It was from a movie. And now it's that ship has sailed.
Yes. It's not funny anymore.
Not funny anymore.
Get serious.
Even here.
This is actually really weird because we're sitting across the table from each other, which hasn't happened in months.
Yeah. All of our podcasts have been remote
for months and months.
Skypiness. So here we are. Hopefully this is the new normal, though.
Yes.
We're finally getting squared away and settled in. It is hot in Venice Beach, though. Like, none of these places have air conditioning because, you know...
Because it doesn't get that hot very often.
They were built in 1900.
Yeah, and that.
and it doesn't get that hot, but man, when it's hot, it's hot.
Yes, definitely.
So, anyway, woe is us.
Poor us. It's 85.
It's 85 degrees.
It's awful.
Goodness. Okay, so September is over quickly.
Yeah.
I think that's sort of the takeaway from this one is that it just flew by. And I don't know if maybe it was because August we had the additional weeks in there, so it seemed like it went on and on, or if September is just that kind of month. But yeah, it's hard to believe, but it's over.
Well, it's always interesting because although September's still technically in summer, it sort of feels like you're already transitioning into fall because, you know, I think school's back in, people are starting to vacation less or kind of calm down, get back into their normal schedule. So, yeah, it was weird. It's like, it felt like we just hit the ground running when we got back and then boom, it's October.
And here we are in October.
Yeah.
Which is cool. And that's fine.
Yeah.
Whatever.
That's good.
Not a lot we can do about it.
Yeah.
But we covered quite a bit of ground in September from like an education perspective, which I thought was cool. You know, we kind of went around the horn with insulin and with gut health and with inflammation and got some interesting conversations going, which is awesome. I mean, that's
absolutely.
Kind of exactly
and, you know, it's great because you guys are also educated that some of it's new information, but for a lot of you, it's just a refresher. And I mean, even when we're writing the articles, it's a refresher for us too, because you kind of get complacent and you sort of forget how all the systems work and how it all shakes out. So it's kind of a good way to reacquaint yourself with why you're doing this. Yeah,
totally. And it's, I mean, especially with the gut health and inflammation stuff and kind of how they're interlinked. When we wrote these articles, some of the information that is available now wasn't available then.
Right.
You know, so it's like it's changing so quickly. You know, our understanding of what's going on with all that stuff is changing really quickly, and so it's which is cool. I mean, it's kind of like we talked about in the last podcast. It's like, okay, this is what we think now. This is what we think today.
Right. Exactly.
Tomorrow, maybe it's a totally different story.
Yeah, so, but nonetheless, the gut is the source code.
Yes, it seems like it. I mean, it sure is starting to look that way more and more. I mean, and of course, you know, intuitively, my gut feeling is that the gut is the most important thing. Right?
Yes. And you know, I'm all about the gut feeling.
Yeah. Vanessa likes the gut.
I do. So I guess we're going to talk a little bit about October, right?
Yeah.
Give you guys a little bit of a sneak peek and kind of go over some concepts as we're moving forward, because we are going to be transitioning the programming for the workouts, and we're going to be adding in some new activation and some stuff that you haven't done before. And some of it might seem familiar if you've, you know, done Pilates or done any kind of preliminary activation before you've done any of your workouts. But it's going to be, I think it's going to be cool. I'm really excited about this month. Yeah,
I think it seems like everybody is, which is cool. I mean, summer was long. Like, there's no doubt about it, you know? Even though September flew by, everybody's ready for fall programming, which is cool.
Well, and it's funny because even though we live in Southern California and there's not the 4 seasons or whatever, there still is. And I look forward to those changes. And Granted, that means instead of wearing shorts, I'm wearing jeans, but like still, I look forward to my jean wearing months.
There's no parkas involved.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But no, it's, I think it's part of our natural cycle as humans to kind of want to shift into a new direction. And it's always, I always like it. I always like the new shift.
For sure. And I mean, I'm pro strength training, and there's just nothing like fall for strength training, honestly. Right. I mean, this is just kind of what goes on. So that really is going to be the focus of the next 3 months is building our strength base, and really not just shooting for numbers in strength, like not necessarily just trying to get whatever particular lift up, but to really strengthen everything at the core. I mean, not the proverbial core, but like the core, like everything. Right. We want to be uniformly strong, sort of top to bottom, and that's really what we're trying to do. And so, like Vanessa was mentioning, the activation stuff is something that we're bringing in, and the concept is that we do this stuff prior to our primary strength training. It really deeply engages the musculature of your physical core, and kind of gets all of that stuff working together, and gets your brain wired into activating that stuff before you do something else. So this kind of core to extremity movement pattern that we've talked about before, where first you need to be stable, and then you can start manipulating external load, right?
Right.
So that's what we're shooting for, and I really think it's incredibly important that we really focus on getting some of this stuff dialed in. And I think you'll find if once you start to do these activations, do these muscle recruitment sort of exercises prior to your principal or primary strength training, that you'll find that everything moves easier, everything feels better. You can lift heavier loads. Like it doesn't feel sketchy,
right?
Which is awesome.
Yeah, and if you think about it, I mean, if you obviously everybody's had different experiences with gyms and working out and whatnot, but I know for me personally, there wasn't a lot of focus on activation before going and lifting. So like if you showed up at the gym, maybe you do a quick warm up, and then you're right into your workout. You know, you're right in whether it's circuit training or heavy lifting or whatever. Right. Usually it's kind of like, okay, you feel warm to the touch. Your heartbeat is, your heartbeat's increased a little bit. Jump in there and start doing some ridiculous feat of strength. So this makes so much more sense when you think about it, really engaging and connecting all the parts of your body that are going to be working to support these mass musculature series that you're going to be going through. So
totally,
it's important.
And there's a component of it as well, that it's not just that we need to activate the stuff in order to be able to move, but what we're really doing in a lot of cases is we're reversing the selective turning off of these muscles from your day, right? So if you sit in one position for a prolonged period of time, your body will start to shut things down. You know, your glutes can be just turned off because what are you doing? You're sitting on your butt and you're not using them for anything. They're just basically, the more relaxed they are, the more cushiony it is for your sit bones. So that stuff shuts off, and you need to do something to wake it all back up, because you can compensate with spinal erectors and with some of the other musculature in your hip. You can completely do everything you're supposed to do without actually engaging those muscles.
Right.
However,
and not realizing that
totally.
You're not engaging the muscles. That's the other thing.
Yeah.
Like you use the example of spinal erectors because that's typically what people will compensate with. That's probably the most common series of muscles that will overcompensate if you can't turn on your glutes.
Yeah.
And so, this is so important for you guys to start tuning into, okay, where am I firing from? What's turned on, what's turned off, and really pulling all that together before you start the lift.
Before you move,
and
this stuff will translate. Like if you really focus on it in the gym, it's like underwear, then pants, then shoes.
Right.
Forgot socks. Underwear, then pants. But some people don't wear socks.
Right.
Or whatever. But once you train that sort of repetitive pattern of muscle recruitment, then it'll translate to everything else in your life. So when you go to get up off of the sofa or sit down in the sofa, next thing you know, you're going to find that you're bracing through the midline, you're externally rotating your feet, and you're reaching your hips back to sit down. Right. And, that's just how you move, and that's really the goal.
Yeah, and one of the things that we'll be referring to this month that I wanted to talk a little bit about before we dove into the next month, just so you had a little bit of clarification out there of what we're talking about, you'll hear us referring to the term neutral spine. And some of you out there may have already heard of this if you've done any kind of Pilates or any kind of core work. Usually people have heard this term neutral spine. And I wanted to bring a little clarification on what neutral spine is versus flat back, or what position your body needs to be in for these core activation exercises that we're going to be doing. So when we talk about flat back, it's just that. It's literally you're trying to press your back as flat against the surface as possible.
If you're laying down.
If you're laying down, yes.
Yeah.
Good point. Whatever surface, you just go push your back against it.
Yeah.
Yes, when you're laying down. Thank you. And neutral spine is when you allow for just a small curve, just a small space to allow for that lordotic curve in your spine. So it's not a huge space between the floor and the bottom, the small of your back. It's just enough to slide maybe 2 fingers in between you and the floor. But it's just enough space that you will actually be able to activate your transverse abdominis more effectively. And so when you are in these different positions, it will recruit different musculature in your abdominal wall. And you want to make sure that for our purposes here, that you're really, really targeting the transverse abdominis. And so, some folks refer to this as the seatbelt muscle, and that's because of the position. If you think about when you put your seatbelt on, where the bottom belt lies across your hips, that's really where the transverse abdominis is. So it's pretty far down, and that's really where you want to think of recruiting. So it's not, in the mid gut. It's literally almost to the pubis bone. And that's really where you want to be pulling back and recruiting when you're doing this core activation. So one of the things you want to watch for when you are trying to keep this neutral spine and you're trying to engage from your transverse abdominis is whether or not your stomach is rising up. And I know it's tricky, and Adam and I were trying to come up with a really slick way of really cueing you guys into whether or not you're letting go of that engagement from the transverse abdominis. And it's really difficult. And the only thing I know is that if you watch your abs, what will happen is once you stop engaging from the transverse abdominis, which is what keeps your abs flat and back against your spine, you will actually get almost like a little loaf of bread that rises up, and it kind of pooches out right in the middle of your stomach and rises up right up like where your belly button is on top and bottom. So, and that's really what you're watching for, is that you don't get this little punch or this little loaf of bread that's rising up, because that means that you're just squeezing, you're just bearing down, and you're not actually pulling your abs back in and wide against your spine.
Yeah, so that what pooches up is the sort of lower insertion point of your anterior abdominal wall. Right. So what would be your six pack, right? Your six pack just pokes straight out in this kind of long and skinny piece, and you get these hollow spots over your hips. And once you can pull all that stuff back down with the transverse abdominis, then it's much flatter. And
to be fair, that's how most people activate their abs, because it's kind of an easier way to just bear down. You can sort of just bear down and you kind of stick the belly out a little bit, but you can get, a nice contraction and activation that way, but that's not the musculature we're looking for when we ask you to activate.
Yeah.
So we want you to really be focusing on pulling everything in flat, keeping everything in really flat to the spine. Is really, I keep saying that, but it's the best way I know how to describe it.
Yeah, you're keeping things pulled in. And that what Vanessa was describing with that sort of bearing down, that increasing the intra-abdominal pressure, that puff your belly out and lift really hard thing is important, but we're going to do that when we're actually lifting.
Exactly.
That is something that your body is almost guaranteed. Your body's wired pretty well to do that.
Absolutely.
So we're looking to get the other half of it engaged.
Like Adam said, because, especially if you've lifted or you've worked out before, that's primarily the way people have trained their abs, no matter what they've done. I know very few disciplines that actually really, really focus on effectively recruiting the transverse abdominis very specifically. And Pilates is one of them, and that's why I'm a huge fan of Pilates. I've talked to a few of you in the feed about that. But it's like Adam said, it's the complementary musculature, so that we're increasing the stability of the whole core structure, and we're not isolating one specific part of it and making that overcompensating for the weaker parts.
Right. Yeah, I've heard it. I've actually not heard of it called the seat belt before, but that actually makes sense. But I've heard of it called like your natural weight belt, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the way, if anybody's ever worn a weight belt, the way it works is that it pushes against your stomach so that you have something to push out against when you're bearing down, right? So it just is a rigid thing you can push against, and that's what the transverse abdominis does for you. It creates that, so you can brace much more effectively.
Yeah, and one of the other things I want to mention about the core activation is any time that your body does start to do this, where you start changing shape, or you see that loaf of bread, or you can't keep your abs in, just take a break. So even though we prescribe a certain number of each core activation, whatever it is that we're exercises, you want to go ahead and take a break as soon as you start to lose shape. Yeah,
because there's no sense in gutting through it. You know what I mean? Like that other thing that you transition into, that anterior abdominal stability thing, that's not going anywhere. That's not what we're trying to train. So you need to just back off, get back in, and activate this stuff. And a lot of it is weak. The musculature itself is weak because we don't turn this stuff on when we sit. If we don't actively do it when we're sitting. And the other part is that when you don't use musculature like this, you lose those neural connections. That sort of neuromuscular signaling. I mean, not that you lose them, but they become, less robust. And it's not the first place that your brain goes when it needs to prevent your spine from collapsing or overextending or something like that, right?
Yeah, this is actually why I love Pilates, is it forces you to really, really fire those pathways and reconnect your brain with how to get into that musculature. And, I'll go to classes where it's literally a whole hour of just some very simple movements. The movements don't have to be extreme or intense, but it's the fact that you're trying to connect your mind to that musculature and really control it in various shapes, and it makes such a difference for your mind-body connection, really.
Yeah.
So women out there who have had C-sections, or if you're like me and you got chopped in half because of a rogue appendix, you may have trouble engaging this area depending on how your incision was made, how well you've healed, if you have adhesions, anything like that. I just want to say this to women out there when they're trying to engage this specific part of their belly and they're literally staring at it and going, it's not moving, it's not working. Okay, don't give up, because it will actually re-engage depending on how long your surgery was. I mean, obviously there are some instances where perhaps the healing process is going to be really long and you may not get as much engagement as you once had, but you can retrain the muscles. And even if it's not in the exact same way, the muscles around that incision will start to click back in and compensate, even if where the incision was made can't actually do what you're asking it to do. So hopefully that makes sense. But, bottom line is, don't give up trying because you think, oh, I can't do this. And I had a surgery, this doesn't work. Keep trying, because it will start to fire. You will start to reconnect those pathways.
Sweet. Pathways reconnected.
Yes. And just one other thing, and then we can move on. Sorry, I just wanted to mention this because weak transverse abdominis really, it can relate to a lot of different imbalances and injuries, but it really causes lower back pain most commonly. And so this is another reason this is super important. And like Adam said, from our sitting, from our day-to-day operations, everything's turned off, which is already sort of putting us on the path towards lower back issues. Mm-hmm. And if you don't compensate by trying to get this part of your body stronger, lower back issues are a very common outcome.
Thing.
Yes.
Totally. And that really does hold true for all of the core musculature, including the glutes. Right?
Sure.
But the thing that why we keep harping on this is because the TA, or transverse abdominis, is harder to activate. Like if you haven't been doing it, it's not something that just comes naturally. Like it's pretty much anybody can just grab glute bridges and start doing glute bridges, and their glutes are going to be activated, and their back will probably immediately feel better.
Right.
But the transverse abdominis is a little bit more tricky, So another thing just to keep in mind when we're doing these activation exercises, you'll notice that there's pretty much always some sort of shoulder activation component and glute activation component along with this transverse abdominis. And the reason for that is that when you incorporate the glutes and the shoulders in whatever it is you're doing, your body just senses that they need to activate the musculature that connects your shoulders to your hips, right? So anytime you are doing this, like as opposed to, say, just doing crunches or something, if you can plank or if you can do these activations like we're talking about here where you engage the hip and shoulder component, you're going to get way more activation and muscle recruitment in the core. So that's why this is, well, part of the reason why this is going on. So when you're watching the videos and you're seeing this stuff and we're talking about keeping your shoulders active and pulled down and away from your ears, stay active in that because that's a large part of what we're trying to do. I mean, the reality is that your core, what we're calling your core, pretty much goes from your ears to your kneecaps. I mean, it's everything in there is equally important. Just some are, more commonly active than others.
Yeah, definitely. And pulling your ears, or pardon me, your shoulders down away from your ears is something you're going to have to keep reminding yourself to do, because when we engage, suddenly we want to activate the shoulders up into the ears because it seems like a more powerful position. Well,
when you bear down, right, you kind of shrug and you do this thing. Right. So yeah, like I've had coaches call it the anti-shrug. You're like, okay, you ready? Turn on your glutes. Pull your sternum down, anti-shrug, and you're like, okay, now I feel, and you're like, wow, okay, yeah, I really do feel like way more tied together, and that's, so that's the deal. Lots of activation.
Yes.
It'll be awesome. You guys will do great.
Yeah.
So another thing that we've added to this, or that you'll notice, is that for all of the strength training, the body weight options, all of the options, but including the body weight options, have the same set and rep scheme. Where before, we had like body weight would be 4x15, or if you're new, 2x15 or something like that. We're switching it up this time because we need to kind of ramp you guys into this linear progression model to get through the strength component of this moving from fall into winter. And so for the body weight, folks, what we're introducing is the time under tension component, or tempo training. And it's super simple, but the way it's written into the program for fall, certainly for October, we may switch it in December, but certainly for fall, it'll be a 2-1-2. So you'll see that written in there. And what that means is that we'll use the push-up for an example. So that means you're sitting at the top of a push-up position. You're going to count 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi to the bottom of the position. You're going to hold there for 1 Mississippi, and then you're going to count 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi to the top of the position. So you're essentially just slowing your movement into this controlled movement with a rest pause at the bottom, and then a nice controlled movement to the top. So this controlled tempo increases the difficulty of the movement, right? You're spending more time under tension, fatiguing the muscles to a larger degree than you were before. It's a pretty slick and potent way to increase the efficiency, or I should say the efficacy, of the body weight stuff, and it's huge for building muscle and strength endurance. I personally, I still think you're better off lifting weights, but if you can't, or if you're just not to that point, then adding this time under tension component will be significant.
Yeah, and if you're new to the program and you're just starting to get moving, by all means, just, you don't have to dive right into the time under tension component of it. Go ahead and just, get through the movement. Just start moving. This is for folks who maybe have been doing the body weight stuff and are starting to, turn their gaze towards maybe a little bit more strength elements and trying to get towards being able to get some actual weight and work, with some resistance training.
Totally. And then the programming as well. So before it would have been, just for example, we'll use the push-up again. So we'll say that it's push-up time. If you've been doing 4 sets of 15, the new programming is going to be 3 or 5 sets of 5, which isn't going to be nearly enough for you. Right. So this time under tension should help, accommodate that.
Right. Cool.
But if 5x5 or 3x5 of the push-up is under just, grunting them out is challenging, then continue to do that until it's no longer challenging, and then add the tempo.
Yep. Absolutely. We're trying to give as many variables and options as we can so that everyone can sort of self-select themselves into the right spot, because there's always room to grow and progress. So where you are is perfectly fine. Just, keep on keeping on.
Keep on cranking.
Yep.
Yeah. So another noticeable change that some of you will be excited about is that there's a dramatic reduction in conditioning. And that is just a necessary component of building muscle and to some degree getting strong. So, sorry, but that's just
this is
just what's happening. Yeah. So we'll try to keep a few in here, and they're going to be pretty challenging. Well, actually, they're super simple, but what we really want is, because there's only a handful here and there, really get after them. Like, go after these workouts hard, because there's only going to be 1 or 2 a week, depending. And you want to try to keep some of that anaerobic engine available.
Right.
It's not that it's not going to really go away, but if you can hit a couple a week, that'll be cool. So just when those things come up, really nail them.
Right. And make sure you also take your rest seriously, because obviously everything that we do, we believe the rest is important, but particularly when you're building strength, you really, really need your downtime, and you need proper rest days so that your body can recover the stress that it was under.
Totally. Yeah. So if you're feeling super recovered on what would be a rest day, and you're feeling really froggy and you want to go do something, don't.
Yes.
Chill. Don't go out and I feel great today, so I'm going to go hit a 45-minute whatever. Like, just don't do it. That's what we want. Where we want you to be is feeling recovered so that you can get after these workouts.
Right. Exactly. And the thing is, these aren't CrossFit workouts. They don't leave you feeling depleted and like you want to throw up and like you need, a couple of days to recuperate. They're not supposed to be those, ass-kicking workouts that leave you on the floor for 20 minutes after you're done. These are supposed to be manageable, strength-based, workouts that are overall designed to make you stronger. Just bottom line.
Yep. That's the goal.
Bottom line.
Bottom line.
Yep.
We're doing that.
Can you guys tell we're so much more serious this week? We're
it's time.
Ooh, it's time to get strong.
No spirit animals.
No more spirit animals.
No spirit animals in strength training. It's like there's no crying in baseball. Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
So another thing coming up, as I'm sure everyone has sort of noticed, especially those of you who have to get up super early in the morning, is that the days are getting shorter. And what that means for us is that our photo period is shrinking, and our social lives or our general environment may not be shrinking at the same rate as the daylight hours, right? So this is the time when the blue blocking glasses and the flux and all of the blue light emitting reduction apps that you can put on your devices, this is when this stuff really starts to count. Because what we need to do for your, this transition into winter is where your body transitions because of this shorter photo period. Your body knows that winter is upon us, and the carbohydrates that are available are going away. And so now it's time to stop eating those and start mobilizing fat to make yourself through the winter. Like that,
right.
To some degree, that thing has to happen. And what really signals that for us are these shorter days. So if we just artificially keep our days long by, which they were naturally long last month, if we artificially keep them long by keeping the lights on, keeping the TV on, all of this kind of stuff, your body never actually switches gears and says, okay, now we're in this, phase of what's going on. And so we need to give our bodies a chance to get there.
Yeah.
Cool?
Got it.
Get
there.
Get there.
Mm-hmm.
Let your body do that.
Yeah. And, you're also going to be seeing changes. Well, maybe you're not going to be seeing changes in all the markets because everything's available year-round everywhere now.
Yeah.
You can get watermelon year-round. But certainly at the farmers markets, you're going to start seeing more root vegetables, Brussels sprouts, cauliflower. All of these things are going to start popping up in more abundance at the farmers markets, or maybe even in your gardens.
Yeah.
And
at Stu's
bring it
house.
on. Stu's going to be
Stu's
cooking
gonna
up.
have all sorts of root vegetables
Can we
available
come
soon.
over for soup at Stu's?
Yeah, stew at Stu's.
Stew's soup. But it's time to bring on the root vegetables, and this is a great time of year to add those back into your diet. It's the perfect season for it. They're readily available.
We're going to be like this is why I think fall is my favorite season. Like, we're going to be strength training. We're going to be sleeping more. We're going to be eating all these nice starchy carbs that are available. It's going to be amazing. And that's where you're going to get super strong. Like, that's how it's going to go.
You know, and one of the things I want to mention for women out there who are like, this is making me a little nervous. I don't want to get bigger. I don't want to, bulk up or whatever.
Not trying to be Lou Ferrigno.
Yeah. So here's the thing. You have to have some amount of strength, some amount of muscle on your body in order to burn off the fat, to lean out, to do all of this stuff. So this is not a super crazy strength program that is going to make you super jacked and pack on a bunch of muscle unless you really, really try to eat a ton and like really hit those workouts with the heaviest possible weight. But for most of us out there, we're going to be using heavy weight. We're going to be increasing our loading each week. We're going to be trying to get a little bit stronger, but don't worry. This isn't a bulking season.
It's not a bulking.
It's not
sure.
a bulking season.
It's actually, it's on the very, very bottom end of hypertrophy or muscle development.
Yes.
Set rep schemes. This is much more strength.
Think of this more as making your body more dense, the muscles that you have becoming more dense and those fibers becoming more dense and really becoming stronger. It's not about adding a bunch of mass.
Yeah. Except for some people.
Mass to your ass.
Some people just put on the mass.
I mean, I will probably get a little bigger. I'm not going to lie, but no, I know, I mean, for me, I know how to manage it. And, I don't even mind putting on a little muscle because it supports what I'm trying to do through the summer and spring. And I just don't train as hard in those months in terms of the strength training. I just really don't. Yeah. And our program, obviously, you guys aren't either if you're following it. We're doing a lot more play, a lot more, anaerobic and aerobic stuff.
Conditioning.
Like, Yep.
Lots and lots of conditioning.
Yes, totally.
Yeah. But yeah, this is definitely the time. It's a great time to get strong. It's a great time to really work on, like healthy motor patterns.
Yes.
And really just start to grease the groove on some of this stuff so that you, like we were mentioning earlier, so that you move outside of the gym similarly to the way that you move inside the gym. You start applying these sort of movement principles and really working on the mechanics.
Yes, definitely. And there is, like Adam said, there's some proprioception built into the activation series that we have here. So, we always want to keep increasing your motor patterns as a human, and we always want to just keep an eye towards, okay, how do we create a superhero at the end of all this?
At the end of all this, how do we do this?
How do we get you to start spraying spider webs out of your hands?
Yeah, that one I haven't sorted out.
I know it's tough.
the programming for that, but
we're working on it. That's next year.
Somewhere. Yeah. Well, maybe there'll be I don't know. That'll be another spirit animal discussion. Yeah. Perhaps.
We're going down the wrong path.
It must be time to wrap this up.
Yeah.
Before we get too far out of line. But yeah, that's kind of the jam. So this is into week 3. We've got the preparation week coming up. Everybody to get squared away. I've already seen some new folks popping in, which is cool.
Yep, absolutely.
Got that going on, ready to get their fall on.
Yeah. And women, if you have any questions out there about, bulking or being worried about any of that, hit me up in the feed because, I'm definitely sensitive towards that issue as well. So
yeah, totally. And it's totally manageable.
Yeah,
it is. That's the thing. So the stuff's all manageable. Just need, 5 or 6 bits of information.
Yes.
Social security card, stuff like that, and then we'll get
a thumbprint, a sample of your DNA,
run it through the spirit animal matrix.
Wait, you're not actually a mesomorph.
You're a mesoectomorph.
Yeah,
with endomorph tendencies.
Yeah, exactly.
Weird.
No, but really, hit me up if you are worried about that, or if you actually start to feel like you're getting bigger, any of that. Some of it will be just a little bit of swelling. Sometimes after a strength training session, you'll get swole.
Yeah, you get swole.
Swole.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good part of inflammation, right?
It is. And, you just need that in order to nurture that tissue to its next phase of being and let it be what it needs to be. But the good news is if you do some of this in the winter months And let's face it, we're wearing sweaters and jeans and we're kind of like covering up anyway. If you just suck it up and do it in the winter months, come bikini season, you'll have all that awesome shredded muscle to just lean out a little bit on top.
It's just to burn calories too, you know, like all that stuff. It's like you throw a steak on there. You don't want to eat.
Yeah, so it really works super well. I mean, and like I said, you're wearing more clothes anyway, so
let's do it.
Let's do it.
Let's get huge.
Yeah. No, but I could just feel the women out there because I'm so sensitive to this.
No, it's for real.
Yes.
And there's probably guys that care too, but I don't know them.
Yeah.
I haven't met too many.
Well, I just keep harping on it because I just want, women to know that I am thinking about that, and I'm always thinking about that. I'm like, wait, how many of those do you want me to do?
Yeah.
How much weight? So we're cool. Like, hit me up. We'll figure it out.
We'll sort it out.
We'll sort it out. Yep.
All right, folks. We're gonna stop this train wreck.
Yes.
All right. We love you all, and we will talk to you in a week.
Yep. Bye.
Bye.